Starbound Awakening. Isolde Nightshade had always known she was different, though she never knew why. But on the night of the blood moon, when the stars vanished and the river ran red, she felt the weight of something waiting for her. The torches flared. The ground trembled beneath her feet. And when she turned, he was already there, golden-eyed and unshaken. "You were born for this," he murmured. "And now it begins." Chapter 1. The Night of Whispers and Shadows. The air in Elderwood Creek was always thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a fragrance Isolde Nightshade had come to associate with a quiet, almost suffocating, sense of unease. Tonight, though, it was different. The usual stillness of the small, forgotten town was replaced by a palpable tension, a humming energy that prickled her skin and made the tiny hairs on her arms stand on end. The moon, swollen and crimson, hung like a bloody eye in the sky, casting an eerie, unsettling glow over everything. Isolde, at 57, felt every one of her years tonight, and yet, simultaneously, felt a stirring of something ancient and unfamiliar within her. She stood on the weathered porch of her small cottage, the one she'd inherited from her grandmother, a woman she barely remembered but whose presence lingered in every creak of the floorboards and rustle of the wind chimes. Isolde had lived a solitary life, marked by a career as a local librarian, a quiet routine, and an unspoken understanding with the townsfolk that she was different. They didn't shun her, not exactly, but they kept a respectful distance, their gazes lingering a little too long, their whispers a little too soft whenever she passed. She'd grown used to it, the subtle othering, the feeling of being a perpetual outsider looking in. Tonight, however, the otherness felt amplified, a chasm widening between her and the world she knew. She wrapped her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders, a futile attempt to ward off the chill that seemed to seep from the very marrow of her bones. The blood moon pulsed, bathing the overgrown garden in a grotesque, theatrical light. Her prize-winning roses, usually a vibrant, comforting sight, looked black and menacing, their thorns gleaming like tiny daggers. Isolde had always been drawn to the moon. As a child, she'd spend hours staring at it, feeling a strange kinship, a pull she couldn't explain. Her grandmother, in the few lucid moments Isolde could recall, had told her stories of moon goddesses and ancient pacts, tales Isolde had dismissed as folklore, the ramblings of an old woman losing her grip on reality. But tonight, those stories felt real. Ominously so. The wind picked up, swirling fallen leaves around her ankles like restless spirits. It carried with it a scent she couldn't quite place, something wild and musky, overlaid with the metallic tang of blood. She frowned, her heart beginning to beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The townsfolk were gathered at the river's edge, their annual blood moon ritual underway. It was a tradition as old as Elderwood Creek itself, a symbolic offering to appease something. Isolde had always avoided it, finding the whole affair unsettling. But tonight, the pull towards the river was undeniable, a magnetic force she couldn't resist. She descended the porch steps, her joints protesting with a familiar ache, and started down the overgrown path that led to the river. The woods on either side were shrouded in deep shadows, alive with the rustling of unseen creatures. The air grew colder, heavier, and the scent of pine and that other scent intensified. She could hear the chanting now, a low, rhythmic drone that resonated deep within her chest, vibrating in her very bones. As she neared the riverbank, the scene that unfolded before her stole her breath. The townsfolk, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of torches, stood in a semicircle around a makeshift altar. Mayor Thompson, a portly man with a perpetually worried expression, was leading the chant, his voice strained and hoarse. The river, usually a gentle, meandering stream, was churning, its surface reflecting the bloody hue of the moon. It looked, Isolde thought with a shiver, like a vein, pulsing with dark, forbidden life. And then the ground trembled. A low growl, guttural and primal, echoed through the trees. The torches flared, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed. The chanting faltered, replaced by gasps of fear and muttered prayers. Isolde felt a surge of something within her. Not fear, not exactly, but a strange, exhilarating anticipation. A sense of recognition. She stepped forward, out of the shadows and into the torchlight, and every eye turned to her. The mayor's face paled, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The chanting ceased completely, replaced by a silence so profound it was almost deafening. And then she saw him. He emerged from the darkness on the opposite bank of the river, a figure silhouetted against the blood moon. Tall and imposing, he moved with a grace that was both animalistic and regal. As he stepped closer, the torchlight illuminated his features, and Isolde felt a jolt, a shock of recognition that went beyond anything she had ever experienced. His eyes, the color of molten gold, met hers across the churning water. They were eyes that held ancient secrets, eyes that had seen centuries pass, eyes that knew her. His face was striking, carved with sharp angles and shadowed hollows, framed by a mane of dark, unruly hair that fell to his shoulders. He wore clothes that seemed both modern and timeless, a dark leather jacket over a simple black shirt, jeans that hugged his powerful legs. But it was his presence, the sheer force of his being, that held her captive. He didn't speak, not at first. He simply stood there, his gaze unwavering, holding her in a silent, powerful embrace. The air crackled with unspoken energy, a tension so thick Isolde could almost taste it. The townsfolk, frozen in place, watched with a mixture of fear and awe. Then, he tilted his head slightly, a subtle movement that somehow conveyed both challenge and invitation. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low rumble that seemed to resonate from the very earth beneath her feet. "You were born for this," he murmured, the words carried on the wind, clear and distinct despite the distance. "And now it begins." His words, and something about his presence, caused a great ache in her. What was this? She wanted to run. She should run. And yet, she was inexplicably rooted to the spot, by both him and by something inside of herself. Chapter 2. Echoes of a Forgotten Past. Isolde stared across the churning river, the blood-red moonlight casting an almost surreal glow on the man's face. His words, "You were born for this," echoed in her mind, a bewildering pronouncement that both terrified and intrigued her. This? What this? She had spent her entire life trying to blend in, to be ordinary, and now, this stranger with eyes like molten gold was telling her she was born for something extraordinary? The townsfolk remained frozen, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Mayor Thompson, his usual bluster gone, was practically trembling. Isolde could feel their gazes on her, heavy with unspoken questions, accusations, and a hint of hope. It was a suffocating feeling, this sudden shift in their perception of her. She was no longer just Isolde Nightshade, the quiet librarian. She was something else, something more. The man across the river didn't move, his golden eyes holding hers in a gaze that felt both predatory and strangely protective. He exuded an aura of power, a raw, untamed energy that made the air around him shimmer. It was a power that both frightened and drew her in, a dangerous allure she couldn't quite understand. Isolde finally found her voice, though it trembled slightly. Who are you?" she asked, the words barely a whisper. He smiled then, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips that revealed a hint of sharp canines. It wasn't a reassuring smile. It was a smile that promised danger, excitement, and a complete upheaval of everything she thought she knew. "You know who I am, Isolde," he said, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within her chest. "Or at least a part of you does. The part you've tried so hard to bury." His words struck a chord, a deep, buried memory flickering at the edge of her consciousness. A dream, perhaps, or a half-forgotten story her grandmother used to tell. A story of a woman, bound by fate to a creature of the night, a woman who possessed a power she didn't understand. A power that was both a gift and a curse. Isolde shook her head, trying to dispel the unsettling images that flashed through her mind. I don't understand, she stammered. I'm just Isolde. The librarian. He chuckled, a deep, throaty sound that sent shivers down her spine. You are so much more than that, Isolde. You are the Blood Moon's herald, the descendant of a lineage that stretches back to the dawn of time. You are the key. The Blood Moon's herald? The key? The words were nonsensical, yet they resonated with a strange familiarity, like a forgotten song playing softly in the back of her mind. She looked at the river, at the churning, blood-red water, and for a moment, she saw something reflected there. Not her own face, but the face of a woman who looked remarkably like her, but younger, wilder, her eyes blazing with a fierce, untamed light. The vision was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving Isolde breathless and disoriented. She clutched at her chest, feeling her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. What do you want? She asked, her voice stronger now, fueled by a growing sense of defiance. He took a step closer, the water swirling around his ankles as he entered the river. He moved with an effortless grace, his eyes never leaving hers. I want to help you remember, he said. To help you understand who you truly are. To help you embrace your destiny. My destiny? Isolde scoffed, a flicker of anger igniting within her. I have no destiny. I have a life, a quiet, ordinary life, and you have a life that is slowly suffocating you, he interrupted, his voice sharp and unwavering. A life built on denial and fear. You hide from the world, Isolde, because you're afraid of what you might find within yourself. But the time for hiding is over. The blood moon has awakened something within you, something that cannot be ignored. His words struck her with the force of a physical blow. He was right. She had been hiding, not just from the world, but from herself. From the strange dreams, the unsettling feelings, the whispers that had haunted her all her life. She had buried them deep, convinced herself they were nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination. But now, confronted by this man, by his undeniable power and his unsettling knowledge of her, she could no longer deny the truth. Something was different. Something had awakened within her. He was halfway across the river now, the water reaching his thighs. He moved with a purpose that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Isolde felt a pull towards him, an undeniable urge to step forward, to meet him in the middle of the churning water. But fear held her back. Fear of the unknown, fear of what he represented, fear of what she might become. He stopped a few feet away, close enough for her to see the intricate details of his face, the lines etched around his eyes, the faint scar that bisected his left eyebrow. He smelled of pine needles and rain and something wilder, something that made her senses hum. Don't be afraid, Isolde, he said, his voice softening, a hint of vulnerability flickering in his golden eyes. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help you. To protect you. His words, so unexpected, so seemingly sincere, chipped away at her defenses. She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, any hint of malice. But all she saw was a profound sadness, a loneliness that mirrored her own. And in that moment, something shifted within her. The fear didn't disappear completely, but it was tempered by a flicker of trust. A fragile, tentative trust, born of a shared vulnerability, a shared sense of being different. He extended his hand, his palm open in invitation. Come with me, Isolde, he said, his voice a low, persuasive murmur. Let me show you who you truly are. The decision hung in the balance, a precipice between the life she knew and the life he offered. A life of shadows and secrets, of power and danger, of love. The thought, unbidden, sent a jolt of heat through her veins. The townsfolk watched, silent and expectant, their fate seemingly intertwined with hers. The blood moon pulsed overhead, casting its eerie glow on the scene, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Isolde took a deep breath, the scent of pine and thunder filling her lungs. And then, slowly, tentatively, she reached out and took his hand. It felt at once familiar and foreign, at once a beginning and an end. Chapter 3. the scent of pine and thunder. His hand was warm, surprisingly so, considering the chill of the night and the icy water that swirled around them. It was a strong hand, calloused and rough, yet his grip was gentle, almost hesitant, as if he were afraid of crushing her. Isolde felt a jolt of energy pass between them, a subtle hum that vibrated through her very bones. It wasn't unpleasant, not exactly, but it was unsettling. Reminder of the power he possessed, the power that was now, somehow, linked to her. As their fingers intertwined, the townsfolk gasped, a collective intake of breath that echoed across the silent riverbank. Mayor Thompson stumbled back, his face ashen. Isolde could feel their fear, their awe, their expectation. She was no longer just Isolde, the librarian. She was something else, something more. And this man, this stranger with eyes of molten gold, was the catalyst for this transformation. He didn't speak, not at first. He simply held her hand, his gaze locked on hers, searching, questioning, understanding. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the churning of the river and the distant howl of a wolf. It was a howl that resonated deep within Isolde, stirring something primal, something ancient, within her. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, her throat tight with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He smiled then, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips that didn't quite reach his eyes. Now, he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them, we go home. Home. The word struck her with an unexpected force. She had lived in Elderwood Creek her entire life, in the same small cottage, surrounded by the same familiar faces. But it had never truly felt like home. It had always felt like a waiting room, a place she was passing through, waiting for something. And now this man, this stranger, was offering her a different kind of home. A home she didn't understand, a home that both terrified and intrigued her. He tugged gently on her hand, and she took a step forward, into the icy water. It was colder than she expected, a shock to her system, but his hand, warm and steady, kept her grounded. He led her across the river, the water swirling around their legs, the blood-red moonlight casting an eerie glow on their faces. As they reached the opposite bank, Isolde realized she didn't know his name. It seemed a strange oversight, given the momentous events of the past hour, the life-altering decision she had just made. I don't even know your name, she said, her voice slightly breathless. He stopped, turning to face her, his golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. He brought her hand to his lips, his touch sending a shiver down her spine, and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. It was a gesture that was both archaic and strangely intimate. My name is Ronan, he said, his voice a low, husky murmur. Ronan Blackwood. Ronan Blackwood. The name suited him, she thought. It was a name that spoke of darkness and mystery, of ancient forests and untamed power. It was a name that sent a shiver of both fear and excitement down her spine. He led her away from the riverbank, into the dense woods that bordered Elderwood Creek. The trees were tall and imposing, their branches intertwined, blocking out most of the moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, overlaid with the wild, musky scent that she had noticed earlier. It was a scent that she now associated with Ronan, a scent that was both alluring and unsettling. As they walked, Ronan began to talk, his voice a low, soothing murmur that helped to calm her racing heart. He spoke of the ancient lineage she belonged to, of the women who had come before her, women who had possessed the same power, the same connection to the moon. He spoke of the Blood Moon's curse, a burden passed down through generations, a curse that bound them to the werewolves, to the creatures of the night. Werewolves. The word hung in the air, heavy with centuries of folklore and fear. Isolde had always dismissed the stories as myths, the ramblings of superstitious villagers. But now, standing beside Ronan, feeling his power, his wildness, she could no longer deny the truth. You're a werewolf, she said, the words barely a whisper, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fascination. He stopped, turning to face her, his golden eyes searching hers. He didn't deny it. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement of his head. Yes, he said, his voice devoid of any shame or apology. I am. He watched her carefully, waiting for her reaction, bracing himself for her fear, her rejection. But Isolde surprised him. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and acceptance. And the curse? She asked, her voice stronger now. What is it? What does it mean for me? Ronan sighed, a deep, weary sound that spoke of centuries of burden, of pain, of loneliness. The curse, he said, binds us together, Isolde. It means that you are my soulmate, my other half. It means that we are destined to be together, for eternity. Soulmate. The word resonated deep within her, a truth she had always felt but never understood. She had always felt a sense of incompleteness, a yearning for something she couldn't name. And now, standing before Ronan, she realized what it was. It was him. He was the missing piece, the other half of her soul. But the curse was a shadow over their bond, a darkness that threatened to consume them. She could feel it, a subtle pressure, a weight on her heart. But what does it mean? She pressed, needing to understand the full extent of the burden she now carried. What are the consequences? Ronan looked away, his gaze fixed on the distant trees. He seemed to struggle with his words, his jaw clenched tight. It means, he said, his voice strained, that we are bound to the moon, to its cycles, to its power. It means that we are vulnerable, susceptible to its influence. It means that we can be controlled. Controlled. The word sent a chill down her spine. Controlled by whom? By what? The question swirled in her mind, unanswered, unsettling. He turned back to her, his golden eyes filled with a profound sadness. It also means, he added, his voice barely a whisper, that we are hunted. There are those who would seek to use our power, to control us, to destroy us. Hunted. The word hung in the air, heavy with danger, with the promise of a life lived on the run, a life of fear and uncertainty. Isolde felt a wave of dizziness, a sense of being overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what she was learning. She had stepped into a world she didn't understand, a world of magic and danger, of curses and soulmates. And she was bound to this man, this werewolf, by a fate she couldn't escape. She was not prepared, and she was not sure that she was ready for what was coming. Chapter 4. A pact sealed in moonlight. The weight of Ronan's words settled heavily upon Isolde, a suffocating blanket of fear and uncertainty. Hunted. Controlled. The implications were terrifying, a stark contrast to the quiet, predictable life she had always known. She looked at Ronan, his face etched with shadows in the dim light filtering through the trees, and saw not just a powerful, enigmatic creature, but a man burdened by a past he couldn't escape, a future he couldn't control. Who hunts us? She asked, her voice trembling slightly, her hand instinctively reaching for his. He took it, his grip firm and reassuring, a silent promise of protection. He sighed, the sound heavy with weariness. There are many, he said, his voice a low rumble. Ancient orders, secret societies, individuals driven by greed and ambition. They have hunted our kind for centuries, seeking to exploit our power, to enslave us, to eradicate us. He paused, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, as if seeing something beyond the veil of the present. The blood moon amplifies our connection, makes us more vulnerable, he continued. It is a time of heightened power, but also of heightened danger. That is why the ritual, that is why they summoned you. Isolde frowned, a flicker of understanding dawning in her mind. The townsfolk, she said. They knew? They knew what I was? Ronan nodded. They knew something, he corrected. They have guarded the secret for generations, passing down the knowledge, the rituals, the fear. They didn't understand the full extent of it, but they knew you were different. They knew you were the key. The key. The word again. It resonated with a power she was only beginning to comprehend. She was the key, the linchpin, the one who could either save them or destroy them. But why me? She asked, a note of desperation creeping into her voice. Why now? Ronan turned to her, his golden eyes searching hers. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle and surprisingly tender. Because you are ready, he said, his voice soft and reassuring. You may not believe it, but you are. You have a strength within you, Isolde, a resilience that you have yet to tap into. The blood moon has awakened it, and now, you must learn to control it. His words, though meant to be comforting, filled her with a sense of unease. She didn't feel strong. She felt lost, confused, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what she was facing. I don't know if I can do this, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not a warrior. I'm a librarian. He smiled then, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, chasing away some of the shadows that lingered there. You are more than you think you are, Isolde, he said. You are a survivor. You are a protector. And you are my soulmate. The word, spoken with such tenderness, sent a warmth spreading through her chest, a flicker of hope in the darkness. She looked into his eyes and saw not just a werewolf, not just a creature of the night, but a man who needed her, just as much as she needed him. We will face this together, he said, his voice firm and unwavering. I will protect you, Isolde. I will teach you everything you need to know. We will break the curse together. Break the curse. The thought, though seemingly impossible, filled her with a surge of determination. She would not be a victim. She would not be controlled. She would fight for her freedom, for their freedom. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her face. He smelled of pine needles and rain and something wild, something that stirred a primal longing within her. There is a pact, he said, his voice a low murmur, an ancient agreement that can strengthen our bond, protect us from those who would seek to harm us. It is a ritual, performed under the blood moon, that will bind us together irrevocably. A pact. A ritual. The word sent a shiver down her spine. It sounded dangerous, irreversible, but it also sounded necessary. What do I have to do? She asked, her voice hesitant. He pulled back slightly, his golden eyes locking onto hers. You have to trust me, Isolde, he said. You have to give yourself to me, completely, body and soul. You have to accept the wolf, accept the curse, accept me. His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. It was a choice, a monumental decision that would alter the course of her life forever. There was no going back. She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, any hint of malice. But all she saw was love, a deep, profound love that transcended the boundaries of their different worlds, their different species. It was a love that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She took a deep breath, the scent of pine and thunder filling her lungs. And then she nodded, a slow, deliberate movement of her head. I trust you, Ronan, she said, her voice firm and unwavering. I accept. He smiled, a slow, radiant smile that lit up his face. He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Then let us begin, he said. He led her deeper into the woods, to a small clearing bathed in the crimson glow of the blood moon. The air was thick with magic, with a palpable sense of anticipation. He knelt before her, his golden eyes never leaving hers. Repeat after me, he said, his voice a low, resonant chant. I, Isolde Nightshade, offer myself to the blood moon, to the ancient pact, to Ronan Blackwood, my soulmate, my protector, my love. Isolde repeated the words, her voice trembling slightly at first, but growing stronger with each syllable. She felt a surge of power, a rush of energy that flowed through her veins, connecting her to Ronan, to the moon, to something ancient and powerful. He continued the chant, his voice weaving a spell of binding, of protection, of eternal love. And as he spoke, the blood moon pulsed, casting its eerie glow on the clearing, sealing the pact, binding them together forever. The world tilted, and she felt an unfamiliar, but not unpleasant, shifting sensation deep within her. Chapter 5. The Gathering Storm Within. The pact, sealed beneath the crimson gaze of the blood moon, left Isolde feeling profoundly changed. It wasn't a physical alteration, not immediately, but an internal shift, a deep resonance that hummed within her very being. The world seemed sharper, more vibrant, the scent of the forest more intense, the sounds of the night amplified. She felt connected to Ronan in a way she couldn't have imagined before, a psychic link that allowed her to sense his presence, his emotions, even when he wasn't physically near. Ronan, his face etched with a mixture of relief and lingering concern, helped her to her feet. The clearing, moments before alive with magic, now felt strangely still, the air heavy with the aftermath of the ritual. "How do you feel?" he asked, his golden eyes searching hers, his voice laced with a tenderness that sent a warmth spreading through her chest. Isolde took a deep breath, trying to articulate the myriad of sensations coursing through her. "Different," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Connected. Stronger somehow, but also vulnerable." He nodded, understanding. "The pact amplifies everything," he explained. "Your senses, your emotions, your connection to the moon and to me. It will take time to adjust, to learn to control the power that now flows within you." He led her out of the clearing, back towards a path she hadn't noticed before. It was narrower, more overgrown, than the one they had taken earlier, winding deeper into the heart of the woods. "Where are we going?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "To my home," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "To a place where you will be safe, where I can teach you what you need to know." His home. The thought sent a shiver of both anticipation and apprehension down her spine. She was stepping into his world now, a world she had only glimpsed in stories and dreams, a world of werewolves and ancient magic, of danger and love. As they walked, Ronan began to explain the intricacies of the curse, the challenges they would face, the enemies they would have to confront. He spoke of the Hunters, a ruthless organization dedicated to eradicating werewolves, and of the Shadow Council, a clandestine group of powerful werewolves who sought to control the Bloodmoon's power for their own nefarious purposes. Isolde listened intently, her mind racing, trying to absorb the sheer volume of information he was imparting. It was overwhelming, terrifying, but also exhilarating. She was no longer just Isolde Nightshade, the quiet librarian. She was a part of something bigger, something ancient, something powerful. The path began to climb, leading them up a steep hillside. The trees thinned, revealing a breathtaking view of Elderwood Creek, nestled in the valley below, bathed in the eerie glow of the receding blood moon. The sky was beginning to lighten, the first hints of dawn painting the eastern horizon with streaks of pale pink and orange. Ronan stopped, pointing to a large, imposing structure nestled amongst the trees on the crest of the hill. It was a house, but unlike any house Isolde had ever seen. It was built of dark stone, with towering windows and a steeply pitched roof, giving it a Gothic, almost medieval appearance. It looked both ancient and timeless, as if it had grown organically from the very earth itself. "This is Blackwood Manor," Ronan said, his voice filled with a quiet pride. "It has been in my family for centuries." Blackwood Manor. The name resonated with the same power and mystery as Ronan himself. It was a place of shadows and secrets, of ancient history and untamed magic. And now it was her home, too. As they approached the house, Isolde noticed subtle details she hadn't seen from afar. Intricate carvings adorned the stone walls, depicting scenes of wolves and moons, of ancient battles and forgotten rituals. The front door, made of heavy oak, was studded with iron and bore a large, ornate knocker in the shape of a wolf's head. Ronan reached for the knocker, but before he could touch it, the door swung open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, a woman, tall and slender, with long, flowing silver hair and piercing blue eyes. "Ronan," she said, her voice a soft, melodious chime. "You have returned, and you have brought a guest." Her gaze fell on Isolde, assessing, curious, but not unkind. There was a hint of recognition in her eyes, a flicker of understanding that sent a shiver down Isolde's spine. Ronan stepped forward, taking Isolde's hand and drawing her into the house. "This is Isolde Nightshade," he said, his voice filled with a warmth that made Isolde's heart flutter. She is my soulmate. The woman's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. But then, she smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her features. Welcome, Isolde, she said, her voice warm and welcoming. I am Alara, Ronan's sister. Alara. Another name that resonated with ancient power, with the whispers of forgotten magic. Isolde felt a wave of relief wash over her. She was not alone. She had Ronan, and now, she had Alara, a potential ally in this strange, new world. But even as she felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of belonging, a shadow of unease lingered in the back of her mind. The pact was sealed, the journey had begun, but the storm was far from over. It was gathering, both within her and around her, and she knew that the challenges ahead would test her strength, her courage, and her love, in ways she could scarcely imagine. The unfamiliar magic pulsed again, a warning rumble in the back of her mind. Chapter 6. Whispers of the Ancient Ones. Alara, with her silver hair and eyes like glacial pools, ushered them into a vast, high-ceilinged hall. The interior of Blackwood Manor was as captivating and imposing as its exterior suggested. Ancient tapestries depicting scenes of wolves hunting under a full moon adorned the stone walls, interspersed with portraits of stern-faced men and women, presumably Ronan and Alara's ancestors. The air hummed with a palpable energy, a subtle thrum of magic that made the hairs on Isolde's arms stand on end. It was a place where the veil between worlds felt thin, where the whispers of the past echoed in every corner. You must be exhausted, Isolde, Alara said, her voice a soothing balm to Isolde's frayed nerves. Come, I've prepared a room for you. You need rest. Isolde, suddenly aware of the bone-deep weariness that had settled over her, nodded gratefully. The events of the night had taken their toll, both physically and emotionally. She felt drained, yet simultaneously wired, her senses on high alert, her mind racing with 1,000 unanswered questions. Ronan squeezed her hand reassuringly. I'll be nearby, he promised, his golden eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Rest, my love. We have much to discuss in the morning. Alara led Isolde up a grand, winding staircase, past more portraits and tapestries, to a wing of the house that felt quieter, more secluded. The air here was cooler, tinged with the scent of lavender and old books. She opened a heavy oak door, revealing a spacious, elegantly furnished room. The room was dominated by a large four-poster bed draped with heavy velvet curtains, its headboard intricately carved with scenes of intertwining vines and blossoming roses. A fireplace, currently unlit, dominated one wall, its mantelpiece adorned with silver candlesticks and a collection of antique clocks. Large windows offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding forest, now bathed in the soft, golden light of the rising sun. This was our mother's room, Alara said, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. She loved the view from these windows. She said it reminded her of home. Home. The word resonated with Isolde, a reminder of the life she had left behind, the life she was still trying to reconcile with this new, extraordinary reality. She wondered about Ronan and Alara's mother, about her life, her connection to the curse, to the blood moon. Your mother, was she like me? Isolde asked, her voice hesitant. Alara smiled, a wistful, knowing smile. In some ways, yes, she replied. She was a strong woman, a powerful woman. But the curse, it took its toll on her. She fought it, for as long as she could, but in the end it consumed her. Her words sent a chill down Isolde's spine. It was a stark reminder of the stakes, of the danger she now faced. She was determined not to suffer the same fate. She would fight, she would learn, she would survive. Alara gestured towards a small, adjoining bathroom. There are fresh towels and toiletries in there, she said. And I've left a nightgown on the bed. Please, make yourself comfortable. I'll bring you some tea and something to eat. Isolde thanked her, feeling a surge of gratitude for Alara's kindness, her understanding. She was a lifeline in this strange, new world, a source of comfort and support. After Alara left, Isolde explored the room, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the furniture, her gaze lingering on the antique clocks, their hands frozen at different times. It was as if time itself stood still in this room, a sanctuary from the chaos and uncertainty that awaited her. She changed into the nightgown, a soft, silk garment that felt luxurious against her skin, and slipped into the four-poster bed. The sheets were cool and crisp, the pillows soft and inviting. She closed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion finally overtake her, pulling her down into a deep, dreamless sleep. But even in sleep, she was not completely at peace. The whispers followed her, the whispers of the ancient ones, the whispers of her ancestors, the whispers of the blood moon. They spoke of power and danger, of love and loss, of a destiny she was only beginning to understand. She dreamt of wolves running through moonlit forests, of ancient rituals performed under a crimson sky, of a woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, her face etched with both sorrow and determination. The woman was Alara, but also someone else. Someone older, more powerful, more ancient. The woman spoke, her voice a low, resonant chant that echoed through Isolde's mind. "The blood moon calls," she said. "The pact is sealed. The time has come." Isolde woke with a start, her heart pounding, her body drenched in sweat. The room was still dimly lit, the rising sun casting long shadows across the floor. The whispers lingered in the air, a faint echo of the dream, a reminder of the task that lay ahead. She rose from the bed and was drawn towards the window. As she stood there, a figure became visible in the growing light. It was Ronan, standing very still and staring directly up at her. Even at a distance, he heard her intake of breath. Chapter 7. The Touch of Forbidden Flame. Ronan stood silhouetted against the burgeoning dawn, his gaze unwavering, locked onto Isolde's window. Even from this distance, she could feel the intensity of his presence, the pull of their connection, amplified by the pact, by the shared magic that now flowed between them. It was a connection that both thrilled and frightened her, a constant reminder of the irreversible step she had taken, the life she had left behind. He raised a hand, a silent greeting, a silent reassurance. Isolde responded with a tentative wave, her heart beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt a sudden urge to be near him, to feel the warmth of his touch, the comfort of his presence. But she also felt a tremor of fear, a hesitation born of the unknown, of the power that now coursed through her veins, a power she didn't yet understand, a power that seemed inextricably linked to him. Alara returned with a tray laden with a steaming pot of herbal tea, a plate of freshly baked scones, and a small bowl of fruit. The aroma filled the room, a comforting blend of cinnamon and cloves, a welcome distraction from the unsettling dreams and the lingering whispers of the ancient ones. "You slept well, I hope?" Alara asked, her voice gentle and concerned, her eyes searching Isolde's face for any sign of distress. Isolde managed a weak smile. "Fitfully," she admitted. "I had strange dreams." Alara nodded knowingly. "The pact," she said. "It often manifests in dreams, in visions. It is the way the ancient ones communicate with us, guide us." Isolde poured herself a cup of tea, the fragrant steam warming her hands. "Who are the ancient ones?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Alara sat on the edge of the bed, her gaze fixed on the distant forest. "They are our ancestors," she explained. "The first werewolves, the ones who made the pact with the blood moon, the ones who possessed the purest form of the power. They are not alive, not in the way we understand it, but their spirits linger, their knowledge preserved in the collective consciousness of our kind." Isolde sipped her tea, the warm liquid soothing her throat. "And they speak to us?" she asked. "Through dreams, through visions, through intuition," Alara replied. "They offer guidance, warnings, but they do not interfere directly. We must make our own choices, forge our own paths." Isolde glanced out the window. Ronan was still there, a steadfast sentinel, his presence a constant reassurance. She wondered what he was thinking, what he was feeling. She could sense his emotions, a subtle undercurrent of protectiveness, of longing, of love. The word, unspoken, sent a jolt of heat through her veins. She had accepted the pact, accepted Ronan as her soulmate, but the reality of that bond, the implications of that love, were still sinking in. It was a love born of magic, of destiny, of a shared curse. It was a love that was both exhilarating and terrifying. He cares for me, Isolde said, the words barely a whisper, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. Alara smiled, a knowing, understanding smile. He loves you, Isolde, she corrected. More than you know. He has waited a long time for you. Waited. The word resonated with the ancient history of their lineage, of the curse, of the blood moon. He had waited centuries, perhaps, for the woman who would share his burden, his destiny, his love. Isolde finished her tea, her appetite surprisingly strong despite the turmoil of emotions swirling within her. She felt a sudden urge to be outside, to be closer to Ronan, to feel the earth beneath her feet, the sun on her face. She excused herself, leaving the remnants of her breakfast on the tray, and made her way downstairs. She found Ronan waiting for her at the front door, his golden eyes gleaming in the morning light. "Sleep well?" he asked, his voice a low, husky murmur. Isolde nodded, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. He reached for her hand, his touch sending a shiver down her spine, a familiar spark of energy passing between them. He led her outside, into the crisp morning air. The sun was fully risen now, casting long shadows across the grounds of Blackwood Manor. The forest beckoned, a tapestry of green and gold, alive with the sounds of birdsong and the rustling of leaves. They walked in silence for a while, their hands clasped together, their steps in perfect sync. It was a comfortable silence, a silence filled with unspoken understanding, with a shared sense of purpose. Ronan stopped at the edge of the forest, turning to face her, his golden eyes searching hers. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle and reverent. "There is something I need to show you," he said, his voice low and intense. "Something about your power, about the curse." He led her into the woods, to a small, secluded clearing bathed in dappled sunlight. In the center of the clearing stood a large, ancient oak tree, its branches reaching towards the sky like gnarled, outstretched arms. Ronan stopped before the tree, his gaze fixed on its trunk. He released her hand, and for a moment, Isolde felt a pang of loss, a sense of disconnection. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and began to chant, his voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. The words were ancient, unfamiliar, yet Isolde felt a stirring within her, a resonance with the magic he was invoking. As he chanted, the air around him began to shimmer, to crackle with energy. His body began to transform, his bones shifting, his muscles rippling, his skin sprouting a thick coat of dark fur. Isolde watched in awe and terror as Ronan, her soulmate, transformed before her very eyes into a magnificent wolf, his eyes still the same molten gold, still filled with love and protectiveness, but now set in a powerful, lupin face. The transformation was both beautiful and terrifying, a testament to the power of the curse, the power that now flowed within her as well. The wolf that was Ronan lowered its head, nuzzling her gently, its warm breath ruffling her hair. It was an invitation, a plea. "Trust me," the golden eyes seemed to say. "Trust the wolf within." Isolde, despite her fear, held still. This was her future. This was her love. She would not run. Chapter 8. Shadows of Doubt and Desire. The wolf, magnificent and imposing, nudged Isolde again, its warm breath stirring a primal response within her, a mixture of fear and fascination. It was Ronan, she knew, yet this form, this wild, untamed creature, was a part of him she was only beginning to understand. It was a part of her, too, now, a latent power that stirred beneath her skin, a shadow self waiting to be awakened. He lowered himself to the ground, a silent invitation, a silent plea. "Trust me," his golden eyes implored. "Trust the bond." Isolde hesitated, her mind reeling. She had accepted the pact, accepted Ronan as her soulmate, but this was a step further, a leap of faith into the unknown, into the heart of the wolf. She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of the man she knew, the man she was beginning to love. And she found him there, in the depths of those golden orbs, a flicker of recognition, a spark of tenderness, a silent promise of protection. Slowly, tentatively, she reached out her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. She touched his fur, the thick, coarse coat surprisingly soft beneath her fingertips. She felt a jolt of energy pass between them, a familiar hum that vibrated through her very bones. It was the pact, the connection, amplified by the physical contact, by the merging of their two worlds. The wolf whined softly, a low rumble in his chest, and nudged her hand again, encouraging her. Isolde took a deep breath, the scent of pine and earth and wolf filling her lungs. And then, with a surge of courage she didn't know she possessed, she climbed onto his back. It was an awkward, clumsy movement, but Ronan remained still, patiently waiting, his powerful body a solid, reassuring presence beneath her. She settled herself, her hands gripping his fur, her legs straddling his broad back. She felt a strange sense of rightness, of belonging, as if this was where she was meant to be. With a powerful surge of his muscles, Ronan rose to his feet. Isolde gasped, clutching tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. He was so much larger, so much stronger in this form. She felt a tremor of fear, a flicker of doubt, but she held on, trusting in the bond, trusting in the love that connected them. He began to walk, slowly at first, his gait smooth and effortless, navigating the uneven terrain of the forest floor. Isolde felt the rhythm of his movements, the power of his muscles, the wildness that thrummed beneath his skin. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and strangely liberating. He moved faster, his pace quickening, breaking into a trot, then a canter, then a full-out gallop. The wind whipped through Isolde's hair, the trees blurred into a streak of green and brown, the scent of the forest intensified, filling her senses. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a thrill of excitement that chased away her fear, replaced it with a sense of pure, unadulterated joy. She laughed, a spontaneous, uninhibited sound that echoed through the trees. It was a laugh of freedom, of release, of embracing the wildness within. She was no longer just Isolde Nightshade, the quiet librarian. She was a part of something bigger, something ancient, something magical. Ronan, sensing her joy, responded with a playful bark, a sound that was both wolf and man, a sound that resonated deep within her soul. He ran faster, leaping over fallen logs, navigating narrow paths, his movements fluid and graceful, a dance of power and agility. They ran for what seemed like hours, the forest unfolding before them, a vast, untamed wilderness that was both beautiful and dangerous. Isolde felt a connection to the land, to the creatures of the forest, to the very essence of nature that she had never experienced before. It was the pact, the curse, the wolf, awakening within her, opening her senses to a world she had always been blind to. Finally, Ronan slowed, his pace gradually decreasing until he came to a stop in a small, secluded clearing bathed in the warm glow of the midday sun. A crystal-clear stream gurgled nearby, its waters sparkling like diamonds. He lowered himself to the ground, allowing Isolde to slide off his back. She stumbled slightly, her legs wobbly from the ride, her body still vibrating with the energy of the run. She felt different. Changed. The wolf had touched her, awakened something within her, and she knew she would never be the same again. Ronan shifted back, his transformation as swift and seamless as before, the wolf receding, the man returning. He stood before her, naked and unashamed, his body sculpted and powerful, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of pride and something else. Something that made Isolde's heart skip a beat. Desire. Raw, untamed, and undeniably mutual. He reached for her, his hands gentle on her skin, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "Did you enjoy that?" he asked, his voice a low, husky murmur. Isolde nodded, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. She looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of her own desire, her own longing, a need that went beyond the physical, a need that was rooted in the depths of their souls. He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, a tentative, questioning touch. It was a spark, a flicker of flame, a promise of something more. But then, he hesitated, pulling back slightly, his eyes clouded with doubt. "Isolde," he said, his voice strained. "The curse, it makes us impulsive. It amplifies our desires, our instincts. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to rush you." He looked down ashamedly. Chapter 9. The Path of Thorns and Roses. Ronan's words, though spoken with gentle concern, stung Isolde with an unexpected force. She understood his hesitation, his fear of the curse, of the amplified instincts that could easily overwhelm their control. But his doubt, his reluctance, also sparked a flicker of resentment, a feeling of being rejected, even though she knew that wasn't his intention. She stepped back, creating a space between them, a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm that had suddenly opened up. The sunlight, moments before warm and inviting, now felt harsh and unforgiving, highlighting the vulnerability she felt, the uncertainty that clouded their future. "So what?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended, a defensive edge creeping in. "Are we to deny what we feel? Are we to live in fear of the curse, of ourselves?" Ronan looked up, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of pain and confusion. "No," he said, his voice low and earnest. "But we must be careful, Isolde. We must learn to control the power, to temper the instincts. We cannot allow the curse to dictate our lives, our love." "And how do we do that?" she challenged, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. "By pretending we don't feel anything? By denying the very bond that connects us?" He reached for her, but she flinched away, a reflex she instantly regretted. The hurt in his eyes was palpable, a mirror of her own inner turmoil. "We learn together," he said, his voice softer now, pleading. "We learn by trusting each other, by communicating, by taking our time." Taking our time. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. It was a reasonable request, a logical approach, but it also felt like a rejection, a denial of the intense connection they shared, a connection that had been forged in magic, in destiny, in the very essence of their beings. Isolde sighed, the fight draining out of her. She knew he was right, logically, but logic didn't always apply to matters of the heart, to the primal pull of a soulmate bond, to the intoxicating allure of forbidden love. I understand," she said, her voice subdued, her gaze fixed on the ground. "But it's not easy. This is all so new, so overwhelming." He stepped closer, closing the distance she had created, his presence a warm, comforting embrace. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle and reassuring, his thumbs caressing her cheeks. "I know," he said, his voice a low, husky murmur. "But we will face it together, Isolde. I promise you. We will find our way, our path, through the thorns and the roses." The thorns and the roses. The metaphor resonated with her, a perfect representation of the duality of their situation, of the curse and the love, of the danger and the beauty. It was a path filled with challenges, with obstacles, but also with the promise of something extraordinary, something worth fighting for. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her face. He smelled of pine needles and rain and wolf, a scent that was both familiar and intoxicating, a scent that stirred a primal longing within her. "I want you, Isolde," he confessed, his voice raw with emotion. "More than I have ever wanted anything in my life. But I want it to be right, to be real. Not just the curse, not just the instinct, but us." His words, so sincere, so vulnerable, melted away her defenses, her doubts, her fears. She looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of her own longing, her own desire, a need that went beyond the physical, a need that was rooted in the depths of their souls. She reached for him, her hands sliding around his waist, her fingers tangling in the soft hair at the nape of his neck. She pulled him closer, closing the gap between them, her body pressing against his. "I want you too, Ronan," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "And I trust you. I trust us." He kissed her then, a slow, deliberate kiss that was both tentative and passionate, a gentle exploration, a silent promise. It was a kiss that tasted of sunlight and forest, of magic and longing of love. It was a kiss that ignited a fire within her, a flame that had been smoldering beneath the surface, waiting to be awakened. The curse, the danger, the uncertainty, all faded into the background, replaced by the overwhelming sensation of being held, of being loved, of being whole. It was a moment of pure connection, a moment of surrender, a moment of hope. But even as she lost herself in the kiss, a shadow lingered in the back of her mind, a whisper of doubt, a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The path was not clear, the future uncertain, but for now, in this moment, in his arms, she felt safe, she felt loved, she felt alive. They had to be ready to face whatever came their way, but in that moment, nothing mattered. Chapter 10. Revelations in the Ruins. The kiss deepened, a slow burn that ignited a fire within Isolde, a passion that was both familiar and terrifyingly new. It was a fusion of souls, a merging of two beings bound by destiny, by magic, by a love that transcended the boundaries of their different worlds. But even as she surrendered to the moment, a flicker of awareness remained, a nagging sense of the precariousness of their situation, of the shadows that lurked just beyond the circle of their embrace. Ronan pulled back slightly, his breath ragged, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of desire and restraint. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones, his gaze searching hers, questioning, understanding. "We should go back," he said, his voice a low, husky murmur, the words laced with reluctance. "Alara will be wondering where we are, and we have much to discuss." Isolde nodded, reluctant agreement. The spell was broken, the reality of their situation returning, the weight of the curse, the threat of the hunters, the uncertainty of their future. But the kiss, the connection, had strengthened her resolve, had reaffirmed her commitment to this path, to this man, to this love. They returned to Blackwood Manor, hand in hand, their steps in perfect sync, a silent understanding passing between them. Alara greeted them with a knowing smile, her eyes twinkling with amusement and approval. She had prepared a late lunch, a simple but delicious meal of roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, and crusty bread. As they ate, Ronan began to reveal more about the history of the Blood Moon Curse, about the ancient pact that bound the werewolves to the moon, to its cycles, to its power. He spoke of a forgotten city, a place of ancient magic, where the pact had been forged, where the secrets of their lineage were hidden. "The ruins of Eredor," he said, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on awe. "It is a place of power, a place of danger, a place where we might find the answers we seek." Eredor. The name resonated with Isolde, a faint echo of a dream, a whisper of the ancient ones. It was a place she had seen in her visions, a place that called to her, a place that held the key to her destiny. "Where is it?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Ronan hesitated, his gaze flickering to Alara, a silent exchange of concern passing between them. "It is hidden," he said, his voice evasive. "Protected by ancient magic, by wards and illusions. It is not easily found. But you know where it is," Isolde pressed, her intuition telling her there was more to the story. Ronan sighed, the weight of centuries of secrets settling upon his shoulders. "Yes," he admitted. "I know. My father showed me, before he died." The mention of his father brought a shadow of sadness to his eyes, a reminder of the loss, the pain, that was woven into the fabric of his existence. Isolde reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, offering a silent gesture of comfort, of support. "We need to go there," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "We need to understand the curse, to find a way to break it." Ronan looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and fear. He knew the dangers, the risks that awaited them. But he also knew that Isolde was right. They could not hide, they could not run. They had to confront their destiny, together. Alara, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "It is a dangerous journey, Isolde," she warned. "The ruins are guarded, not just by magic, but by creatures twisted by the curse, corrupted by the darkness." "I know," Isolde said, her voice resolute. "But we have no choice. We have to try." Ronan squeezed her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We will go together," he said. "And we will be prepared." He spent the rest of the afternoon explaining the layout of Eredor, the challenges they would face, the creatures they might encounter. He showed her ancient maps, drawn on faded parchment, depicting the city's intricate network of tunnels, its hidden chambers, its sacred sites. He spoke of the guardians, creatures of shadow and stone, animated by ancient magic, tasked with protecting the city from intruders. He spoke of the shadow beasts, werewolves twisted by the curse, their minds consumed by darkness, their bodies warped into grotesque forms. Isolde listened intently, her mind racing, trying to absorb the sheer volume of information. It was overwhelming, terrifying, but also exhilarating. She was stepping into a world of ancient magic, of forgotten lore, of mythical creatures. She was a part of a story that stretched back centuries, a story that was still being written. As evening approached, Ronan led her to a small, secluded room in the manor, a room filled with weapons. Swords, daggers, bows and arrows, and strange, arcane objects that Isolde couldn't identify. "You will need to learn to defend yourself," he said, his voice serious. "The hunters are relentless, and the creatures of Eredor are unpredictable." He picked up a silver dagger, its blade gleaming in the dim light. "This is silver," he explained. "It is one of the few things that can truly harm a werewolf. It is also effective against other creatures of the night." The blade had runes. She reached for it. Chapter 11. The Dance of Fate and Choice. The silver dagger felt strangely heavy in Isolde's hand, the cold metal a stark reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. The intricate runes etched into the blade seemed to hum with a subtle energy, a faint vibration that resonated with the power that now flowed within her. It was a weapon, yes, but it was also a symbol, a representation of the battle she was about to enter, a battle not just against external forces, but against the darkness that lurked within the curse itself. Ronan watched her carefully, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and pride. He knew she was afraid, but he also saw a flicker of determination in her gaze, a strength that was beginning to emerge, fueled by the pact, by their love, by the daunting task that lay before them. "It's beautiful," Isolde said, her voice barely a whisper, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the hilt. Ronan smiled, a faint, fleeting smile that chased away some of the shadows that lingered in his eyes. "It was my mother's," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. "She was a skilled warrior, a fierce protector. She taught me everything I know." He picked up a sword, its blade long and slender, crafted from a dark, almost black metal that seemed to absorb the light. "This is Nightshade," he said, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on awe. "It has been in my family for generations. It is said to be imbued with the power of the moon, with the essence of the curse itself." He handed her the sword, and Isolde gasped. It was heavier than she expected, yet it felt strangely balanced in her hand, as if it were an extension of her own arm. The dark metal seemed to pulse with a subtle energy, a vibration that mirrored the hum of the silver dagger. I don't know how to use this," she confessed, her voice filled with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. Ronan stepped closer, his body brushing against hers, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. He placed his hands over hers, guiding her grip on the hilt, his warm breath stirring the hair at her temple. "I will teach you," he said, his voice a low, husky murmur. "We will train together. We will prepare for what awaits us in Eredor." He began to show her basic stances, simple movements, the foundations of swordsmanship. He moved with a grace and fluidity that was mesmerizing, his body a symphony of controlled power, a testament to centuries of training, of instinct, of the wolf. Isolde struggled at first, her movements clumsy and awkward, her muscles protesting the unfamiliar strain. But Ronan was patient, encouraging, his touch gentle and reassuring, his guidance precise and unwavering. He corrected her posture, adjusted her grip, showed her how to parry and thrust, how to use her body weight to her advantage. He taught her not just the physical techniques, but the mental discipline, the focus, the awareness that were essential for survival. As they trained, Isolde felt a connection to Ronan that went beyond the physical, beyond the pact, beyond the shared curse. It was a connection forged in sweat and effort, in shared purpose, in mutual respect. It was a dance of fate and choice, a weaving together of their two lives, their two destinies. Hours passed, the sun setting, casting long shadows across the room. Isolde's muscles ached, her body was drenched in sweat, but she felt a sense of accomplishment, a growing confidence in her abilities. She was still a novice, a beginner, but she was learning, she was growing, she was transforming. Ronan finally stopped, his own body glistening with perspiration, his breathing slightly labored. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with admiration. "You are a fast learner, Isolde," he said, his voice filled with a genuine pride. "You have a natural talent, a warrior spirit." Isolde smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "I have a good teacher," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them, his gaze locking onto hers. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead, his touch sending a familiar shiver down her spine. "We make a good team," he said, his voice a low, husky murmur. "We will face this together, Isolde. We will conquer the darkness, together." He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, a tentative, questioning touch. It was a kiss of gratitude, of respect, of love. It was a kiss that sealed their partnership, their commitment to each other, to their shared destiny. But even as they kissed, a shadow fell across the room, a chill that had nothing to do with the setting sun. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, a woman, tall and slender, with long, flowing silver hair and piercing blue eyes. It was Alara, but her expression was different. Her eyes were narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line, her face etched with a mixture of concern and suspicion. "Ronan," she said, her voice sharp and urgent. "We have a problem." The shift in her tone was drastic. Chapter 12. Tears of the Moonlit River. Alara's words, sharp and laced with an urgency that sent a jolt of icy fear through Isolde, shattered the intimate moment. The warmth of Ronan's near kiss still lingered on her lips, but the sudden shift in Alara's demeanor, the palpable tension that now filled the room, banished any lingering thoughts of romance. Ronan stepped back, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of nightshade, his body tensing, his senses on high alert. He knew his sister, knew that she wouldn't interrupt them without a compelling reason, a serious threat. "What is it, Alara?" he asked, his voice low and guarded, his golden eyes fixed on her face, searching for any clue to the nature of the problem. Alara's gaze flickered to Isolde, a fleeting expression of apology, crossing her face before settling back on Ronan, her eyes filled with a grim determination. "It's the town," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Mayor Thompson, he's betrayed us. He's alerted the hunters." "The hunters?" The word hung in the air, heavy with menace, with the promise of violence, of a relentless pursuit that had haunted the werewolves for centuries. Isolde felt a cold dread creep into her heart, a chilling premonition of the danger that was now closing in on them. How do you know?" Ronan asked, his voice strained, his hand tightening around the hilt of his sword. Alara stepped further into the room, her movements swift and purposeful. She held up a small, silver locket, intricately carved with the image of a crescent moon. "This was my mother's," she explained. "It's a communication device of sorts. It allows me to sense the emotions, the intentions, of those who are connected to the blood moon, to the curse. She opened the locket, revealing a small, shimmering crystal that pulsed with a faint, red light. "The crystal is clouded," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It indicates betrayal, danger, a disruption in the balance." Isolde felt a surge of anger, a righteous fury directed at Mayor Thompson, at the townsfolk who had betrayed them, who had broken the ancient pact of secrecy that had protected the werewolves for generations.
"Why?"
she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Why would they do this?" Alara sighed, a deep, weary sound that spoke of centuries of prejudice, of fear, of misunderstanding.
"Fear," she said. "Greed."
The hunters, they offer rewards. They promise protection. They prey on the vulnerabilities of those who are different. Ronan slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through the room, a physical manifestation of his frustration, his anger, his helplessness. "We have to leave," he said, his voice urgent.
"Now."
"They'll be here soon." Isolde nodded, her mind racing, trying to assess the situation, to formulate a plan. She was still a novice, a beginner, but she was not helpless. She had the silver dagger, the sword, and most importantly, she had Ronan and Alara. "Where will we go?"
she asked.
Ronan hesitated, his gaze flickering to the window, to the darkening forest, to the distant mountains that loomed on the horizon. "Eridor," he said, his voice resolute. "It's the only place we'll be safe. It's our only hope." Alara stepped forward, placing a hand on Ronan's arm, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "I'll go with you," she said. "I won't let you face this alone." Ronan shook his head. "No, Alara," he said. "It's too dangerous. You need to stay here, protect the manor, protect our secrets." Alara's eyes flashed with anger. "And leave you to face the hunters, the guardians, the shadow beasts, alone?" she challenged. "I think not. I am a warrior, Ronan, just like you. Just like our mother." Ronan and Alara stared at each other, a silent battle of wills, a clash of two strong personalities, two siblings bound by love and loyalty, but divided by differing strategies, differing approaches to the same insurmountable problem. Isolde, watching them, felt a pang of inadequacy. She was an outsider, a newcomer to this world, a novice in the art of combat, a burden rather than an asset. But she was also Ronan's soulmate, bound to him by the pact, by the curse, by a love that was growing stronger with each passing moment. She stepped forward, placing a hand on each of their arms, her touch bridging the gap between them, her presence a calming influence in the midst of the storm. "We go together," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "All of us. We are stronger together. We will face this together. We will survive together." Her words, spoken with a conviction she didn't quite feel, seemed to break the tension, to unite them in a shared purpose. Ronan and Alara looked at her, their eyes softening, their expressions shifting from defiance to acceptance. Ronan nodded, his hand covering hers, his touch sending a surge of warmth through her veins. "Together," he agreed, his voice filled with a renewed determination. Alara smiled, a faint, fleeting smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Together," she echoed. They gathered their supplies, weapons, provisions, anything they might need for the perilous journey ahead. They left Blackwood Manor under the cover of darkness, three figures silhouetted against the moonlit sky, embarking on a desperate quest, a race against time, a battle for survival. As they reached the river, the same river where Isolde's life had irrevocably changed, they paused. The water, no longer blood-red, still reflected the moonlight, creating an ethereal, almost magical scene. But the beauty was marred by a sense of foreboding, a premonition of the tears that were yet to be shed, the sacrifices that were yet to be made. The wind carried their scent. Chapter 13. The Price of Protection. The river, now shimmering silver under the moon's pale gaze, served as a stark reminder of Isolde's transformation, of the night her life had irrevocably changed. It also served as a boundary, a line between the familiar, however fraught, and the unknown perils that lay ahead. The wind, whispering through the trees, carried their scent, a beacon to any who might be hunting them, a constant reminder of their vulnerability. "We need to mask our scent," Ronan said, his voice low and urgent, his senses on high alert, scanning the surrounding forest for any sign of movement, any hint of danger. "The hunters, they have trackers, werewolves who have betrayed their own kind, who use their heightened senses to hunt us." Alara nodded, her face grim, her eyes narrowed in concentration. She reached into a small pouch at her waist, pulling out a handful of dried herbs, their pungent aroma filling the air, a mixture of earthy and bitter scents that made Isolde's nose wrinkle. "This will help," she said, her voice confident. "It's a blend of wolfsbane, nightshade, and other secret ingredients. It will confuse their senses, disrupt their tracking abilities." She began to crush the herbs in her hands, releasing their potent oils, the fragrance intensifying, becoming almost overwhelming. She rubbed the mixture on her skin, on her clothes, and then offered some to Ronan and Isolde. Isolde hesitated, her stomach churning at the strong, bitter smell. She had always been sensitive to strong odors, and this was intense. But she knew it was necessary, a crucial step in their attempt to evade the hunters, to survive. She took a deep breath and rubbed the mixture on her arms, on her neck, on her clothes, the pungent scent clinging to her skin, a strange and unsettling perfume. Ronan did the same, his movements swift and practiced, his face a mask of grim determination. They crossed the river, the cold water swirling around their ankles, a chilling reminder of the dangers they faced, of the precariousness of their situation. The forest on the other side was darker, denser, more foreboding, the trees looming like silent sentinels, their branches intertwined, blocking out most of the moonlight. As they walked, Ronan began to explain their plan, their route to Eredor, the ancient city that held the key to their survival, to breaking the curse. He spoke of hidden paths, secret passages, ancient wards that protected the city from intruders. "It will be a difficult journey," he warned, his voice serious. "We will need to be constantly vigilant, constantly aware of our surroundings. The forest is full of dangers, not just the hunters, but other creatures, creatures twisted by the curse, corrupted by the darkness." Isolde nodded, her heart pounding in her chest, her senses on high alert. She gripped the silver dagger tightly in her hand, the cold metal a reassuring presence, a symbol of her determination to fight, to survive. They walked for hours, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves, the hooting of owls, the distant howl of a wolf. It was a howl that sent a shiver down Isolde's spine, a reminder of the wildness that lurked within her, within Ronan, within the very essence of the curse. Suddenly, Ronan stopped, his body tensing, his head raised, his nostrils flaring. He sniffed the air, his golden eyes scanning the surrounding darkness, his senses searching for any sign of danger. "Something's not right," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I smell blood. And something else. Something unnatural." Alara, too, was on alert, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "I sense it too," she said. A darkness, a presence close by. Isolde felt a chill creep down her spine, a prickling sensation on her skin, a premonition of imminent danger. She gripped the dagger tighter, her heart pounding in her chest, her senses straining to pierce the darkness, to identify the threat. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a hulking, distorted shape that moved with an unsettling combination of animalistic grace and unnatural stiffness. It was a werewolf, but unlike any Isolde had ever seen. Its fur was matted and patchy, its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, its fangs bared in a grotesque snarl. It was a shadow beast, one of the creatures Ronan had warned her about, a werewolf twisted by the curse, its mind consumed by darkness, its body warped into a monstrous form. Behind it, more figures emerged, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, their growls echoing through the trees. They were surrounded. Ronan pushed Isolde behind him, his body shielding her from the approaching threat, his hand resting on the hilt of Nightshade. Alara stood beside him, her sword drawn, her face a mask of fierce determination. "Stay behind me, Isolde," Ronan said, his voice low and commanding. "And be ready to run." The shadow beasts lunged, their claws extended, their fangs bared, their movements swift and brutal. Ronan and Alara met them head-on, their swords flashing in the moonlight, a dance of death and defiance. Isolde watched in horror and awe as Ronan and Alara fought, their movements fluid and graceful, their skills honed by centuries of training, of instinct, of the wolf. They were a formidable force, a whirlwind of steel and fury, but the shadow beasts were numerous, relentless, their bodies seemingly impervious to pain. One of the beasts broke through their defenses, lunging towards Isolde, its red eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Isolde reacted instinctively, raising the silver dagger, her hand trembling but her grip firm. She plunged the dagger into the beast's chest, the silver piercing its flesh, eliciting a piercing shriek of pain and rage. The beast stumbled back, its body convulsing, its red eyes dimming, its form dissolving into shadows. Isolde felt a surge of something, a mixture of fear and exhilaration, of revulsion and power. She had killed. She had defended herself. She had survived. But the battle was far from over. More shadow beasts were closing in, their numbers seemingly endless. Ronan and Alara were tiring, their movements slowing, their defenses weakening. Suddenly, Ronan cried out in pain, clutching his arm, his sword falling to the ground. One of the beasts had managed to slash him, its claws tearing through his flesh, drawing blood. Isolde's heart leaped into her throat. She had to do something. She had to help him. She couldn't just stand there and watch him die. She looked around quickly. This was their only chance. She started chanting, her voice joining with Ronan's, calling upon her power. Chapter 14. The Call of the Wild Heart. Isolde's chant, instinctive and raw, rose above the din of battle, a clear, unwavering note that resonated with the power of the blood moon, with the ancient pact, with the wildness that stirred within her. It was a call for help, a plea to the ancient ones, a desperate attempt to tap into the magic that flowed through her veins, to harness the power of the curse itself. As she chanted, she felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that spread through her body, from the tips of her fingers to the roots of her hair. Her senses sharpened, her vision cleared, her hearing became more acute. She felt connected to the forest, to the earth, to the very essence of nature, in a way she had never experienced before. The air around her shimmered, crackled with energy, the moonlight seeming to coalesce, to focus on her, bathing her in an ethereal glow. Her eyes, normally a hazel green, began to glow with a golden light, mirroring Ronan's, reflecting the power of the wolf, the power of the blood moon. The shadow beasts, momentarily startled by this sudden display of power, hesitated, their red eyes flickering with uncertainty. Fear? It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough. Ronan, despite his injury, seized the opportunity. He retrieved his sword, his movements fueled by adrenaline, by a desperate need to protect Isolde, to protect Alara, to survive. He fought with renewed vigor, his blade a blur of motion, his attacks precise and deadly. Alara, too, seemed to draw strength from Isolde's chant, her movements becoming more fluid, more graceful, her sword singing a song of death as she cut down the remaining shadow beasts. The tide of the battle had turned. The shadow beasts, overwhelmed by the combined force of Ronan, Alara, and Isolde's newfound power, began to falter, to retreat, to dissolve back into the shadows from whence they came. Silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the ragged breathing of the three survivors, the dripping of blood, the rustling of leaves. The air, still thick with the scent of blood and magic, gradually began to clear. Ronan, leaning heavily on his sword, his arm bleeding profusely, turned to Isolde, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Isolde," he said, his voice hoarse, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You saved us." Isolde, still trembling from the surge of power, from the adrenaline, from the sheer terror of the battle, shook her head. We saved each other, she said, her voice shaky. Alara approached them, her face etched with concern. She examined Ronan's arm, her fingers probing the wound, her expression grim. It's deep, she said, but not fatal. We need to clean it, bind it, prevent infection. She tore a strip of cloth from her tunic, using it to bandage Ronan's arm, her movements swift and practiced. She then turned to Isolde, her eyes searching hers, questioning, understanding. That was remarkable, Isolde, she said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. You tapped into the power of the blood moon, the power of the ancient ones. You have a gift, a potential that is extraordinary. Isolde felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. She had discovered a power within her she didn't know she possessed, a power that had saved their lives. But it was a power that was also dangerous, a power that could easily overwhelm her, consume her, if she didn't learn to control it. I don't understand it, she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. It just happened. I felt connected, to the moon, to the forest, to everything. Ronan, his arm bandaged, his strength slowly returning, placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. It's the wolf, Isolde, he said, his voice soft and understanding. The wild heart within you. It's awakening. The wild heart. The words resonated with her, a truth she had always felt but never understood. She had always been drawn to nature, to the moon, to the untamed beauty of the wilderness. She had always felt a sense of otherness, a feeling of being different, of not quite belonging. And now she understood why. She was a part of something ancient, something powerful, something wild. They continued their journey, their pace slower now, hampered by Ronan's injury, by the lingering effects of the battle, by the constant threat of danger. But they were not defeated. They were stronger, more united, more determined than ever. They had faced death, had stared into the abyss, and had emerged victorious. They had discovered a power within themselves, a power that could save them, or destroy them. It was a power that they had to learn to control, to harness, to wield wisely. The path ahead was still uncertain, the dangers still numerous, but they were not alone. They had each other. They had the wolf. They had the blood moon. As they walked, Isolde felt a subtle shift within her, a growing awareness of her connection to Ronan, to Alara, to the very essence of their shared destiny. She was no longer just Isolde Nightshade, the quiet librarian. She was Isolde, the blood moon's herald, the warrior, the protector, the lover. She glanced at Ronan, his face etched with pain and determination, his golden eyes meeting hers, a silent exchange of love and commitment passing between them. She knew that the journey ahead would be long and arduous, but she was ready. She was prepared to fight, to love, to live. The wolf called to her, and for the first time, she felt ready to fully answer. Chapter 15. Scars of the Past, Bonds of the Future. The arduous trek through the dense, shadowed forest continued, each step a testament to their resilience, their determination to reach Eredor, the mythical city that held the key to their future, to breaking the curse that bound them. Ronan's injury, though bandaged, slowed their pace, a constant reminder of the battle they had just survived, of the dangers that still lurked in the darkness. Isolde, walking beside him, felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce desire to shield him from any further harm. She had discovered a power within her, a wildness that had awakened, and she was determined to use it to protect him, to protect Alara, to protect their love. They stopped frequently to rest, to allow Ronan to regain his strength, to tend to his wound. Alara, with her knowledge of herbs and healing, prepared poultices and salves, using plants she gathered from the forest, her movements swift and practiced, her face etched with concern. During one of these rests, as Isolde sat beside Ronan, watching Alara carefully clean his wound, she noticed a series of scars on his back, faint lines that crisscrossed his skin, a silent testament to past battles, past pain, past loss. She reached out, her fingers tracing the lines of one of the scars, her touch gentle and tentative. Ronan flinched slightly, his body tensing, his golden eyes flickering with a mixture of pain and surprise. What happened? She asked, her voice soft and concerned, her heart aching for the pain he had endured, the pain he still carried within him. Ronan hesitated, his gaze shifting away, his jaw clenching slightly. He was reluctant to speak of his past, to reveal the vulnerabilities that lay beneath his strong, protective exterior. It was a long time ago, he said, his voice evasive, his words carefully chosen. A battle with hunters. I was younger then, less experienced. Isolde knew there was more to the story, a deeper pain that he was unwilling to share. She respected his silence, his need for privacy, but she also felt a surge of empathy, a desire to ease his burden, to heal his wounds, both physical and emotional. It's okay, she said, her voice soothing, her hand resting on his arm, offering a silent gesture of comfort, of support. You don't have to talk about it. But I'm here for you, Ronan. Always. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and love. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, his grip firm and reassuring. Thank you, Isolde, he said, his voice a low, husky murmur. That means more than you know. Alara, finished with tending to Ronan's wound, joined them, her expression somber. We need to keep moving, she said. We're losing daylight, and I sense we're being followed. Isolde felt a chill creep down her spine, a prickling sensation on her skin, a premonition of imminent danger. The hunters, relentless and unforgiving, were still on their trail, their pursuit fueled by hatred, by fear, by a desire to eradicate the werewolves, to control the power of the blood moon. They resumed their journey, their pace quickened by a sense of urgency, by the constant threat of discovery. They moved through the forest like shadows, silent and stealthy, their senses on high alert, scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement, any hint of danger. As they walked, Isolde began to think about her own past, about the life she had left behind, the quiet, predictable existence that now seemed a distant memory, a world apart from the perilous reality she now inhabited. She thought of her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, the woman who had told her stories of moon goddesses and ancient pacts, stories that Isolde had dismissed as folklore, as the ramblings of an old woman losing her grip on reality. But now she understood. Her grandmother had known, had sensed the power that lay dormant within Isolde, the destiny that awaited her. She had tried to prepare her, to warn her, but Isolde had been too young, too naive, too afraid. She felt a pang of regret, a longing for the woman who had loved her, who had tried to guide her, who had ultimately sacrificed herself to protect her. She had died shortly after Isolde's 18th birthday, a sudden, unexpected illness that had left Isolde alone, adrift in a world she didn't understand. Ronan, she said, her voice hesitant, her thoughts turning to the present, to the man who had become her anchor, her protector, her love. What about your parents? Alara mentioned your mother, but what about your father? Ronan's face clouded over, his golden eyes darkening with a mixture of pain and anger. He walked in silence for a moment, his jaw clenched tight, his fists clenched at his sides. He was killed, he said, his voice strained, his words clipped. By the hunters. They ambushed him, tortured him, trying to force him to reveal the location of Eridor. He didn't break. He protected the secret, until his last breath. Isolde felt a surge of empathy, of understanding, of shared grief. She had lost her grandmother, he had lost his father, both victims of the same relentless hatred, the same cruel persecution. I'm so sorry, Ronan, she said, her voice filled with compassion, her hand reaching for his, offering a silent gesture of comfort, of support. He took her hand, his grip tight, almost painful, but she didn't flinch. She understood his pain, his anger, his need for vengeance. We will avenge him, Isolde, he said, his voice firm and unwavering, his golden eyes blazing with a fierce determination. We will find Eridor. We will break the curse. And we will make the hunters pay for what they have done. His words, spoken with such conviction, such passion, ignited a fire within her, a determination to fight alongside him, to share his burden, to achieve their shared destiny. They were bound together, not just by the pact, not just by the curse, but by shared loss, by shared pain, by a shared desire for justice, for peace, for love. The scars of the past had forged the bonds of the future, a future they would face together as one. They kept going, the setting sun now sending long shadows. Chapter 16. The Unveiling of Secrets. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mimic the uncertainty and danger that clung to their every step. The forest, once a place of solace for Isolde, now felt like a menacing labyrinth, its beauty masked by the constant threat of the hunters, the lurking presence of creatures twisted by the curse. As darkness enveloped them, the air grew colder, the silence more profound, broken only by the rustling of leaves, the hooting of owls, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot, each sound amplifying their sense of vulnerability, their awareness of being hunted. Ronan, his senses heightened by the encroaching night, by the proximity of Eredor, led them with a quiet confidence, his steps sure and steady, his gaze constantly scanning the surroundings, searching for any sign of danger, any indication of the hidden entrance to the ancient city. Alara, walking close behind, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, her eyes narrowed in concentration, was equally vigilant, her senses attuned to the subtle whispers of the forest, to the subtle shifts in energy that might betray the presence of friend or foe. Isolde, despite her growing exhaustion, her lingering fear, felt a surge of anticipation, a sense of excitement mixed with trepidation. They were close. She could feel it, the ancient magic of Eredor pulsing beneath the earth, calling to her, beckoning her closer. Suddenly, Ronan stopped, his body tensing, his head raised, his nostrils flaring. He sniffed the air, his golden eyes fixed on a seemingly impenetrable wall of rock and tangled vegetation. "We're here," he said, his voice a low, hushed whisper, his words filled with a mixture of relief and awe. Isolde and Alara exchanged glances, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had reached their destination, the mythical city of Eredor, the place where the Blood Moon Pact had been forged, where the secrets of their lineage were hidden. But how to enter? The wall before them seemed solid, impassable, offering no clue to the hidden entrance, no indication of the magic that lay beyond. Ronan stepped forward, his hand reaching out, his fingers tracing the rough surface of the rock, searching for a hidden lever, a secret mechanism, a sign, anything that would reveal the way in. He closed his eyes, his breathing deepening, his senses reaching out, seeking the subtle vibrations of ancient magic, the faint echoes of the past. He began to chant, his voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very earth beneath their feet. The words were ancient, unfamiliar to Isolde, yet she felt a stirring within her, a resonance with the magic he was invoking, a connection to the power of the blood moon, to the ancient pact, to the lineage she now shared. As he chanted, the air around them began to shimmer, to crackle with energy. The wall of rock, seemingly solid moments before, began to dissolve, to melt away, revealing a narrow, arched opening, a passage leading into the darkness. It was an illusion, a magical ward designed to conceal the entrance to Eredor, to protect it from intruders, from those who would seek to exploit its power. Ronan stopped chanting, his body trembling slightly from the effort, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "The entrance is open," he said, his voice hoarse. "But be warned, Isolde, Alara. Eredor is not what it seems. It is a place of power, yes, but also of danger. The Guardians are still active, the shadow beasts still roam its tunnels. And there are other secrets, darker secrets, that have yet to be revealed." He looked at Isolde, his gaze intense, his eyes searching hers, questioning, understanding. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Isolde took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest, her senses on high alert. She was afraid, yes, but she was also determined. She had come this far, had faced so much, had discovered a power within her she didn't know she possessed. She would not turn back. She would not falter. "I'm ready," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, her gaze meeting his, a silent promise of loyalty, of courage, of love. Ronan nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring, his touch sending a surge of warmth through her veins. Alara, her sword drawn, her face a mask of fierce determination, stood beside them, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. They stepped through the arched opening, into the darkness of Eredor, the entrance sealing shut behind them, plunging them into a world of ancient magic, of forgotten lore, of secrets that were about to be unveiled. The air was immediately different, heavy with magic. Chapter 17. The Edge of the Abyss. The air within Eredor was heavy, thick with the scent of dust and decay, of ancient magic and forgotten secrets. It was a palpable weight, a pressure that settled upon Isolde, making her breath catch in her throat, her heart pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The darkness was absolute, impenetrable, a stark contrast to the moonlit forest they had left behind. Ronan, his senses heightened by his werewolf nature, by his connection to the ancient city, moved with a quiet confidence, his hand still clasped tightly in Isolde's, guiding her through the unseen passage, his steps sure and steady despite the lack of light. Alara, her sword held before her, her eyes scanning the darkness, walked close behind, her presence a reassuring buffer against the unknown dangers that lurked in the shadows. "There should be torches," Ronan said, his voice a low murmur, his words barely audible above the silence, above the pounding of Isolde's heart. "My father showed me a mechanism to activate them." He stopped, his hand releasing Isolde's, his fingers tracing the cold, damp stone wall, searching for a hidden lever, a secret switch, anything that would trigger the ancient lighting system. Isolde felt a pang of loss, a sense of vulnerability without his touch, without his presence guiding her. She reached out, her hand brushing against his arm, a silent plea for reassurance, for connection. He turned to her, his golden eyes, though barely visible in the darkness, reflecting a faint glimmer of understanding, of empathy. He took her hand again, his grip firm and comforting, his touch sending a surge of warmth through her chilled veins. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice soft and reassuring. "I'm here. We're together." His words, simple yet profound, calmed her racing heart, eased her fears, strengthened her resolve. She was not alone. She had Ronan, she had Alara, and she had the power of the blood moon, the power of the ancient ones, flowing within her. Suddenly, Ronan's fingers found a small, almost imperceptible indentation in the stone wall. He pressed it, and a faint click echoed through the passage, followed by a low, grinding sound. Flickering lights began to appear along the walls, torches springing to life, illuminating the passage with a warm, orange glow, revealing the intricate carvings that adorned the stone, depicting scenes of wolves and moons, of ancient battles and forgotten rituals. The passage was narrow, winding, descending deeper into the earth, the air growing colder, heavier, the silence more profound, broken only by the crackling of the torches, the dripping of water, the faint echoes of their footsteps. As they walked, Isolde began to notice subtle details she hadn't seen before. The carvings on the walls, though ancient, were remarkably preserved, their lines crisp and clear, their images vivid and lifelike. They told a story, a history of the werewolves, of their connection to the moon, of their struggle for survival. She saw images of women, strong and powerful, wielding swords and magic, leading their packs into battle, protecting their families, their communities. She saw images of the blood moon, a symbol of both power and curse, of destiny and sacrifice. She felt a connection to these women, to their strength, their courage, their resilience. She was a part of their lineage, a descendant of their legacy, an inheritor of their power. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast, cavernous chamber, its ceiling lost in the shadows, its walls lined with more carvings, more torches, more secrets. In the center of the chamber stood a large, circular altar, made of a dark, almost black stone that seemed to absorb the light. "This is it," Ronan said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "The heart of Eredor, the place where the pact was forged." Isolde felt a shiver run down her spine, a prickling sensation on her skin, a premonition of something. The air in the chamber was thick with magic, with a palpable sense of anticipation, of danger. As they approached the altar, the ground began to tremble, a low rumble that vibrated through their very bones. The torches flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. From the shadows, figures emerged, their forms shifting and swirling, their eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. They were the guardians, creatures of shadow and stone, animated by ancient magic, tasked with protecting the city from intruders. And they were not alone. From the deeper recesses of the chamber, more figures emerged, their growls echoing through the vast space, their fangs bared in grotesque snarls. They were the shadow beasts, werewolves twisted by the curse, their minds consumed by darkness, their bodies warped into monstrous forms. Ronan pushed Isolde behind him, his body shielding her from the approaching threat, his hand resting on the hilt of Nightshade. Alara stood beside him, her sword drawn, her face a mask of fierce determination. "Here we go again," Alara stated grimly. The edge was upon them. Chapter 18. A Love Forged in Fire. Alara's grim understatement, a stark contrast to the chaotic scene unfolding before them, hung in the air, a fragile thread of defiance against the overwhelming odds. The guardians, their stone bodies shifting and reforming, their eyes glowing with an eerie red light, advanced with a slow, inexorable force, their movements accompanied by a grinding, grating sound that set Isolde's teeth on edge. The shadow beasts, their forms more fluid, more menacing, circled them, their growls echoing through the vast chamber, their fangs bared in anticipation of the kill. Ronan, his body tensed, his senses on high alert, stood between Isolde and the approaching threat, his sword Nightshade held before him, its dark metal reflecting the flickering torchlight, a symbol of his determination to protect her, to protect Alara, to survive. "Stay close, Isolde," he said, his voice low and urgent, his golden eyes fixed on the advancing guardians, his focus unwavering. "And be ready to fight." Isolde nodded, her heart pounding in her chest, her hand gripping the silver dagger, the cold metal a reassuring presence, a reminder of the power she possessed, the power she had discovered within herself. She was afraid, yes, but she was also angry. Angry at the curse, at the hunters, at the creatures that threatened them, at the forces that had disrupted her life, that had forced her to fight for her survival, for her love. The battle began, a chaotic clash of steel and stone, of magic and fury. Ronan, with his centuries of experience, his instinctive understanding of combat, fought with a grace and precision that was both beautiful and terrifying. He moved like a whirlwind, his sword a blur of motion, deflecting blows, parrying attacks, striking with deadly accuracy. Alara, equally skilled, equally determined, fought beside him, her sword singing a song of death as she cut down the shadow beasts, her movements fluid and graceful, her face a mask of fierce concentration. Isolde, though a novice, fought with a courage and determination that surprised even herself. She had learned from Ronan, had absorbed his teachings, had tapped into the wildness within her, the power of the blood moon, the power of the ancient ones. She used the silver dagger, her movements swift and precise, targeting the vulnerable spots of the guardians, the joints between their stone limbs, the cracks in their ancient armor. She dodged and weaved, using her agility to her advantage, avoiding the crushing blows of their stone fists, the slashing attacks of their clawed hands. But the guardians were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless, their strength formidable. The shadow beasts, though easier to kill, were more numerous, their attacks more savage, more unpredictable. Ronan and Alara were tiring, their movements slowing, their defenses weakening. Isolde, too, felt the exhaustion creeping in, her muscles aching, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Suddenly, one of the guardians broke through Ronan's defenses, its stone fist connecting with his chest, sending him crashing to the ground, his sword flying from his grasp. Isolde cried out, her heart leaping into her throat. She had to do something. She had to protect him. She couldn't let him die. She lunged forward, ignoring the danger, her focus solely on Ronan, on the guardian that loomed over him, its stone fist raised, ready to deliver the final blow. She plunged the silver dagger into the guardian's back, the metal piercing its stone hide, eliciting a piercing shriek of pain and rage. The guardian stumbled, its body convulsing, its form dissolving into dust, leaving Ronan sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath. Isolde rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she checked for injuries, her heart pounding with relief when she found no serious wounds, just bruises and scrapes. "Ronan," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Are you okay?" He looked up at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and love. He reached for her hand, his grip weak but reassuring. "I'm fine," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thanks to you." He struggled to his feet, retrieving his sword, his body aching, his strength depleted, but his determination unwavering. He stood beside Isolde, their shoulders touching, their bodies forming a united front against the remaining attackers. Alara, seeing them together, fighting side by side, felt a surge of hope, a renewed sense of purpose. She redoubled her efforts, her sword flashing in the torchlight, her movements swift and deadly. Together, the three of them fought, their combined strength, their shared love, their unwavering determination, pushing them beyond their limits, beyond their fears, beyond the edge of despair. They fought not just for survival, but for each other, for their future, for the promise of a life free from the curse, free from the hunters, free from the darkness that threatened to consume them. It was a love forged in fire, a love tested by adversity, a love that had blossomed in the midst of chaos and danger, a love that was stronger than any curse, any enemy, any obstacle. As the last of the guardians crumbled to dust, as the last of the shadow beasts dissolved into shadows, silence descended upon the chamber, broken only by the ragged breathing of the three survivors, the dripping of blood, the crackling of the torches. They had won. They had survived. But the battle had taken its toll. They were exhausted, injured, their bodies aching, their spirits weary. And they knew that the war was far from over. The heart of Eredor awaited them, along with answers and a new confrontation. Chapter 19. The Battle for Tomorrow. The silence of the chamber, heavy with the aftermath of battle, with the lingering scent of dust and blood and magic, pressed upon them, a stark contrast to the chaotic clash that had just ended. Isolde, leaning against Ronan, her body trembling with exhaustion, her muscles aching, felt a profound sense of relief, of gratitude, of love. They had survived. They had fought together, had protected each other, had emerged victorious against seemingly insurmountable odds. But the victory was bittersweet, a temporary reprieve in a war that was far from over. Ronan, his arm wrapped around her waist, his body a warm, comforting presence against hers, gently stroked her hair, his touch soothing, reassuring. He, too, was exhausted, his body bruised and battered, his strength depleted, but his spirit remained unbroken, his determination unwavering. Alara, her sword still in her hand, her face streaked with sweat and grime, her eyes filled with a mixture of weariness and pride, approached them, her gaze flickering from Ronan to Isolde, a silent acknowledgement of their shared struggle, their shared victory. "We need to move," she said, her voice hoarse, her words clipped. "The altar, it's the key. We need to understand the pact, find a way to break the curse." Her words, though spoken with a sense of urgency, also betrayed a hint of desperation, a recognition of the daunting task that still lay ahead. The battle had been won, but the The true battle for their future, for their freedom, was just beginning. They approached the altar, the large, circular structure made of a dark, almost black stone that seemed to absorb the light, its surface smooth and cold, its presence radiating a palpable sense of ancient power, of forgotten secrets. As they drew closer, Isolde felt a tingling sensation on her skin, a subtle vibration that resonated with the power that now flowed within her, with the connection she had forged with the blood moon, with the ancient ones. Ronan, his senses heightened by his werewolf nature, by his lineage, felt it too. He stopped before the altar, his golden eyes fixed on its surface, his hand reaching out, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings that adorned its edges. The runes, he said, his voice a low murmur, his words barely audible above the silence. They tell the story of the pact, of the first werewolves of their agreement with the moon. Isolde and Alara joined him, their eyes following his gaze, their minds struggling to decipher the ancient symbols, to understand the meaning of the carvings, to unravel the secrets of the curse. The runes depicted scenes of wolves hunting under a full moon, of women wielding magic, of a celestial being, a goddess, perhaps, reaching down from the heavens, her hand outstretched, offering a gift, a curse, a pact. As Isolde studied the runes, she felt a connection to them, a resonance with their ancient power, a sense of understanding. She began to see patterns, to decipher meanings, to unravel the story they told. The pact, it was a bargain, she said, her voice trembling slightly, her words filled with a mixture of awe and horror. The first werewolves, they sought power to protect their families, their communities from their enemies. They asked the moon goddess for help, and she granted their request. But there was a price. Ronan nodded, his face grim, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. The price was their freedom, he said. They gained strength, agility, the ability to shift into wolves. But they also became bound to the moon, to its cycles, to its power. They became vulnerable, susceptible to its influence. They became slaves. Alara, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief, shook her head. Slaves? She whispered. We are slaves to the moon? Isolde, her mind racing, her heart pounding, continued to decipher the runes, to piece together the puzzle, to unravel the truth. Not just slaves, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. The pact had also created the hunters. The moon goddess, she demanded a balance. For every werewolf there must be a hunter, a force to oppose them, to control them, to keep them in check. The realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. The curse was not just a burden, a limitation, a source of danger. It was a deliberate act, a carefully constructed system of control, a cosmic game of cat and mouse, with the werewolves as the unwilling prey. Ronan slammed his fist against the altar, the sound echoing through the chamber, a physical manifestation of his rage, his frustration, his despair. We are nothing but pawns, he said, his voice bitter, his golden eyes blazing with anger. Used, manipulated by forces beyond our control. Isolde, seeing his pain, his despair, felt a surge of determination. She would not accept this fate. She would not be a pawn. She would not be a slave. She would fight for her freedom, for their freedom, for the future they deserved. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm, her gaze meeting his, a silent promise of hope, of resilience, of love. No, Ronan, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. We are not pawns. We are the players. We can change the game. We can break the curse. We can rewrite the rules. Her words, spoken with such conviction, such passion, ignited a spark of hope within him, a flicker of light in the darkness. He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, questioning, understanding, believing. Alara, too, felt the shift, the resurgence of hope, the renewed determination. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the altar, beside Ronan's, beside Isolde's. Together, she said, her voice firm and resolute. We will face this together. We will find a way. We will win. As their hands touched the altar, a surge of energy pulsed through them, a wave of ancient power that shook the very foundations of Eredor. The runes on the altar began to glow, to shimmer, to change. A new image appeared, a vision, a prophecy, a glimpse of a possible future. A future where the werewolves were free, where the hunters were vanquished, where the blood moon no longer held them captive. It was a vision of hope, a vision of possibility, a vision of victory. But it was also a vision of sacrifice, of struggle, of a final, epic battle that would determine the fate of their kind, the fate of their love, the fate of their tomorrow. It would all come to a head under the next moon. Chapter 20. The final confrontation of hearts. The vision, shimmering and ephemeral, faded from the altar, leaving behind a residue of hope and a chilling premonition of the battle to come. The runes, once again static, seemed to hum with a renewed energy, a silent testament to the power they held, to the destiny they foretold. The next moon. The final confrontation. Their chance to break the curse, to claim their freedom, to forge a future free from the shadows of the past. Isolde, her hand still resting on the altar, beside Ronan's, felt a surge of determination, a fierce resolve to face whatever challenges lay ahead, to fight for the future they had glimpsed, for the love they shared. Ronan, his golden eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight, his face etched with a mixture of grim determination and unwavering love, squeezed her hand, his touch a silent promise of support, of protection, of forever. Alara, her gaze fixed on the altar, her mind racing, trying to decipher the nuances of the vision, to glean any clues, any advantages that might help them in the coming battle, stood beside them, a silent pillar of strength, of loyalty, of hope. "We need to prepare," she said, her voice low and urgent, her words breaking the silence that had fallen upon them. "The hunters, they will be coming. They will be stronger than ever. And they will have allies." Her words, though spoken with a sense of urgency, also betrayed a hint of fear, a recognition of the formidable forces they would be facing, of the overwhelming odds they would have to overcome. Ronan nodded, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "We will be ready," he said, his voice firm and unwavering, his words a vow, a promise, a challenge. "We will gather our allies. We will fight. We will win." They left Eredor, the ancient city receding behind them, its secrets revealed, its power harnessed, its destiny intertwined with theirs. They returned to Blackwood Manor, their steps heavy with the weight of the knowledge they had gained, with the burden of the battle that awaited them. The days that followed were a blur of activity, of preparation, of planning. Ronan and Alara reached out to other werewolf packs, to those who had remained loyal to the ancient ways, to those who had resisted the lure of the hunters, to those who yearned for freedom from the curse. Isolde, using the knowledge she had gained from the runes, from the vision on the altar, began to hone her own powers, to tap into the wildness within her, to master the magic that flowed through her veins. She trained with Ronan and Alara, her skills growing with each passing day, her confidence increasing, her determination unwavering. She learned to control her transformations, to shift between her human and wolf forms with ease and grace. She learned to wield the silver dagger, the sword nightshade, with precision and power. She learned to harness the energy of the blood moon, to channel it into spells of protection, of healing, of destruction. But as the days dwindled, as the next moon approached, a shadow of doubt, a flicker of fear, began to creep into Isolde's heart. She had come so far, had grown so strong, had discovered a love that transcended the boundaries of their different worlds. But she was still human, still vulnerable, still afraid. She feared for Ronan, for Alara, for the werewolves who had pledged their loyalty to them. She feared for herself, for the possibility of failure, for the consequences of defeat. She feared the darkness that lurked within the curse, the power that could consume her, control her, if she wasn't careful. One evening, as she sat alone on the porch of Blackwood Manor, watching the moon rise in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows across the grounds, Ronan found her, his golden eyes filled with concern. "Isolde," he said, his voice soft and gentle, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. What's wrong? You seem distant. She looked at him, her heart aching with a mixture of love and fear. She wanted to be strong for him, for Alara, for their cause. But she couldn't hide her doubts, her vulnerabilities, from the man who knew her better than anyone else, the man who shared her soul. I'm afraid, Ronan, she confessed, her voice trembling slightly, her words barely a whisper. Afraid of failing. Afraid of losing you. He sat beside her, taking her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her face. We will not fail, Isolde, he said, his voice filled with conviction, with unwavering belief. We have come too far, have fought too hard, have loved too deeply. We will face this together, as we have faced everything else. And we will win. His words, spoken with such passion, such certainty, eased her fears, strengthened her resolve, rekindled the fire of hope within her. She looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of her own determination, her own love, her own strength. He kissed her then, a long, slow kiss that was both tender and passionate, a kiss that sealed their bond, their commitment, their love. It was a kiss that tasted of hope and fear, of sacrifice and victory, of forever. The next night, under the full glow of the moon, they gathered their allies, a diverse group of werewolves, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of defiance and hope. They stood on the banks of the same river where Isolde's life had changed forever, the same river that had witnessed the sealing of the pact, the beginning of their journey. Across the river, the hunters assembled, their numbers vast, their weapons gleaming in the moonlight, their faces masked by hatred, by fear, by a blind obedience to a twisted ideology. And among them, a figure emerged, tall and imposing, his eyes glowing with a malevolent red light, his form shrouded in darkness. It was the leader of the hunters, the one who had orchestrated the betrayal, the one who had hunted Ronan's father, the one who sought to control the power of the blood moon. The final confrontation had begun. The battle for tomorrow, the battle for freedom, the battle for love. Hearts would meet and clash. Destinies would collide. Epilogue. The air crackled with tension, with the raw energy of opposing forces, with the palpable sense of a battle that would determine not just the fate of werewolves and hunters, but the fate of a love born under a cursed moon. The river, reflecting the silvery light, served as a silent witness, a dividing line between two worlds on the brink of collision. Ronan, standing at the forefront of his assembled allies, his golden eyes fixed on the leader of the hunters, his hand resting on the hilt of Nightshade, radiated a power that was both primal and regal. He was the alpha, the protector, the lover, ready to defend his pack, his future, his Isolde. Isolde, standing beside him, her hand clasped tightly in his, her other hand gripping the silver dagger, felt a surge of strength, of courage, of love. She was no longer the quiet librarian, the woman who had hidden from the world, from herself. She was the blood moon's herald, the warrior, the protector, the soulmate. Alara, her sword drawn, her face a mask of fierce determination, stood on Ronan's other side, a silent pillar of support, of loyalty, of family. She had lost much, had endured unimaginable pain, but she had found a new purpose, a new strength, in this fight for freedom, for a future free from the shadows of the past. The battle commenced, not with a roar, but with a silent, deadly grace. Werewolves and hunters clashed, their movements a blur of motion, their weapons flashing in the moonlight, their growls and cries echoing through the night. It was a dance of death, a struggle for survival, a test of wills. Ronan and the hunter leader met in the center of the fray, their swords clashing, their eyes locked in a fierce battle of wills. It was a personal vendetta, a settling of old scores, a fight for justice, for vengeance, for the future. Isolde, fighting alongside Alara, moved with a newfound agility, a newfound power, her silver dagger finding its mark, her movements guided by instinct, by training, by the wolf within. The battle raged, a chaotic maelstrom of violence and magic, of loss and sacrifice. Werewolves fell, hunters fell, the ground stained with blood, the air filled with the cries of the wounded, the howls of the dying. But amidst the chaos, amidst the carnage, a glimmer of hope persisted. Ronan and Isolde, fighting as one, their love a beacon in the darkness, began to turn the tide. Their combined strength, their shared power, their unwavering determination, inspired their allies, pushed them forward, gave them the strength to fight on. In a final, climactic confrontation, Ronan disarmed the hunter leader, his sword nightshade pointed at the man's throat, his golden eyes blazing with righteous fury. But he hesitated. He could kill him, and the threat, avenge his father, secure their victory. But something held him back. Something Isolde had taught him. Something about mercy, about compassion, about breaking the cycle of violence. He lowered his sword, his gaze unwavering, his voice filled with a quiet strength. "It ends here," he said. "We will not be slaves to the past. We will forge our own future. A future of peace, of understanding, of freedom." The hunter leader, defeated, disarmed, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and respect, nodded slowly. The battle was over. The war was won. The remaining hunters, seeing their leader defeated, their cause lost, surrendered, their weapons falling to the ground, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and shame. The werewolves, their bodies bruised and battered, their spirits weary but triumphant, gathered around Ronan and Isolde, their howls of victory echoing through the night, a celebration of freedom, of survival, of love. Years passed. The blood moon curse was broken, the pact with the moon goddess dissolved, the werewolves freed from their ancient bondage. They learned to live in harmony with humans, to embrace their dual nature, to use their powers for good, for protection, for peace. Ronan and Isolde, their love deepened by the trials they had overcome, by the battles they had fought, by the future they had forged together, lived a long and happy life, surrounded by their family, their friends, their pack. They often returned to the river, to the place where their journey had begun, to the place where their love had blossomed, to the place where they had claimed their freedom. And as they stood there, hand in hand, watching the moon rise in the sky, its light no longer a symbol of curse and control, but a beacon of hope and possibility, they knew that their love, forged in fire, tested by adversity, strengthened by sacrifice, would endure forever. The river always remembered the first night.